Hello, welcome to Thor Talk, the show all about Marvel's resident God of Thunder. By the end of the Silver Age, 5 superheroes emerged as pillars of strength in Marvel Comics. The Incredible Hulk, The Thing, Hercules, Namor the Submariner, and the mighty Thor. But strength is meaningless in a vacuum. Fans began debating who was the strongest among these, and clamoring for their strength to be measured in combat. This resulted in every single one of these heroes fighting each other at least once, and in many cases, it also led to some of the most iconic rivalries in comics. Thor vs. the Hulk, Hulk vs. the Thing, Thor vs. Hercules, Namor vs. the Thing, Hulk vs. Namor, all iconic clashes which have seen numerous fights both in and out of comics. But one rivalry, which seemed perfect, never quite got off the ground. 2 ancient members of royalty. 2 prideful warriors of faraway worlds. One, a god of the skies. The other, a king of the seas. One desires to protect the earth. The other often wants to conquer it. Thor and Namor. On this episode of Thor Talk, we'll be looking at their fights over the years and discover why their rivalry never reached the heights of others. So, let's begin on Thor Talk.
I am Thor the Thunderer, son of Odin, prince of Asgard, and this world is under my protection.
Thor and Namor first fought in Avengers number 3. Namor teams up with the Hulk to take down the Avengers, and they begin by using a device to take Iron Man out. To buy the Avengers time to repair Iron Man, Thor throws his hammer, which ricochets around the cave and keeps Namor and the Hulk at bay for 58 seconds. Namor calls it the most impressive display of power he's ever witnessed. Then Giant Man throws Namor to Thor, but Iron Man steps in because he's worried that Thor will fail to hold back and accidentally kill Namor. Namor charges Thor to prove that he's overrated, but Hulk steps in to help and mocks Namor for thinking he could take on Thor alone. Hulk tries to lift Mjolnir while Thor and Namor continue to fight. Giant Man grabs Namor, and Thor uses Mjolnir to force Namor into a trap. But Namor is revitalized by water pouring on him, and he begins to escape. Wasp tells Thor to use Mjolnir to stop Namor, but Thor lets him go because he respects his valor. This first battle does not give Thor an outright win, but it does have nearly every character saying that Thor is too much for Namor to handle. The next fight is in the very next issue, Avengers number 4. Namor and his troops ambush the Avengers. Namor commands his forces to shoot Thor so that Namor can attack while he's stunned. Namor's forces are taken out by Thor, so Namor takes him on himself. The rest of the Avengers show up as Namor attempts to lift Thor's hammer, but he fails. Thor tells Namor to surrender, but Namor refuses and leaves the Avengers to die in a sudden earthquake. Thor and Namor would have their first one-on-one fight in Submariner number 59. Tamara, a resident of Atlantis, is captured and taken to the United Nations. Thor is called in to guard her, and Namor confronts him. Thor thinks that Namor has come to help, but Namor says she is a resident of Atlantis that was captured. Thor asks for proof of what Namor says, which angers Namor, who attacks Thor. Namor quickly realizes that he is no match for Thor on the surface and decides to lead Thor away from Tamara. Namor dives into the river and Thor follows him. The pollution in this New York river is so bad that Namor can't see, but Thor can see perfectly fine. Namor manages to sever Mjolnir's leather thong and tries to escape. Thor leaps out of the water and dives ahead of Namor. Thor uses his cape to catch the blind Namor and decides to end the conflict quickly by throwing Namor into the air. Namor goes flying for several miles before he is able to recover, and he returns to Atlantis having failed in his mission. Namor is pretty consistently weaker on land, but incredibly strong underwater. But here, Thor pretty easily dispatches him despite this. While these previous battles definitely favored Thor, the next one would utterly humiliate Namor. In Invaders number 32 to 33, Adolf Hitler transports Thor to Earth during World War II and uses war footage to convince Thor to kill Joseph Stalin. Thor encounters the invaders and summons a storm in order to intimidate them into surrendering so he doesn't have to harm them. It doesn't work as Captain America punches Thor, but this only hurts his own hand and throws him back. Namor catches Captain America and charges at Thor, but Thor knocks out Namor with a single punch. Namor recovers later and rejoins the fight with the other invaders, but Thor pushes through them and succeeds in killing Stalin. Thor is able to overhear Hitler's rantings and realizes that he was on the wrong side. Thor revives Stalin, who is revealed to be a fake, then wipes the memories of the invaders before leaving. Again, utterly humiliating for Namor. Namor is made more powerful when he comes in contact with water, and yet here, during a massive rainstorm, Namor is knocked out by Thor with one punch, and then Thor proceeds to kill the man Namor was trying to protect and wipe Namor's mind of both defeats. The next fight occurs in Avengers 292, though it's not much of a fight. Namor's wife Namora is transformed into a monster, and the Avengers pursue her. Namor lands a single punch on Thor to keep him away from his wife, and that's all that occurs. The closest fight between these two characters occurs in Fantastic Four Atlantis Rising #1, when Thor is placed under Morgan Le Fay's control, and sent after Namor. Namor is hit with Mjolnir and then narrowly avoids a blast from the hammer. Namor attacks Thor, but then Thor grabs Namor by the throat and slams him into the ocean. Namor says that he has the advantage here, and he proves this by landing 3 hits on Thor while dodging Thor's one attack. Thor then takes Namor out of the water and throws him into an energy field. The two fight in the sky until a third party knocks out Namor with an energy blast. In this fight, Namor seems to have an advantage underwater, but at the same time, Thor is easily able to take him out of the water and remove that advantage. Thor assisted the Avengers against Namor in Avengers vs. X-Men #8. Here, Namor is empowered by the Phoenix Force. Thor manages to get 2 good hits on Namor and states that he pities Namor for being driven by madness. The two continue fighting, and Namor is grabbing Thor by the cape when Scarlet Witch breaks up the fight. In Thor Volume 5 #1, a weaker version of Thor fights Namor, but we don't see the result. Thor walks away from the fight with what he wanted, which led many to believe that he won the fight, but we really don't know. In Avengers #9, Thor attacks Namor with the Avengers, but Namor catches his hammer and begins to crush it. It should be a good showing for Namor, except that this is a weaker version of Thor, with a weaker hammer going up against a stronger version of Namor. Thor and Namor even outright confirm this during the fight. Thor and Namor do not come to blows again for the rest of the fight. Now that we've looked at their fights, let's look at the 3 main reasons why Thor and Namor's rivalry was unable to succeed. The first reason is a substantial difference in power. For the most part, Thor has a clear advantage over Namor in their fights. Namor's allies and enemies are constantly trying to keep him away from Thor so Thor doesn't kill him. Thor picks up Namor out of the sea and throws him several miles away. Thor knocks Namor unconscious in the rain, kills the person Namor is trying to protect, and makes Namor forget about the whole thing. Namor does stand strong in a few fights, but most of them are due to a power boost. The one exception is in Fantastic Four Atlantis Rising, where Namor manages to give Thor problems underwater, but can't keep the fight going underwater. Namor looked much better in this fight, but it wasn't enough to challenge the overall narrative that Thor is much stronger than him. Looking at fan debates online, the question isn't who would win between Thor and Namor, but who would win between Thor and 5 Namors. Marvel even supports this stance officially with a strength chart putting Thor in the top tier and Namor in a tier below him. Still, this difference in power should not be enough to crush the rivalry on its own. After all, Namor has a rivalry with the Hulk, and the Thing has a rivalry with the Hulk as well. It is possible for lower tier characters to have rivalries with higher tier characters. This brings us to the second reason why Thor and Namor's rivalry didn't develop. Thor's temperament is not suited to it. When the Thing and the Hulk clash, the Hulk is usually the antagonist. He has a tendency to go a bit out of control, and the Thing must stand up to the rampaging monster. The Thing goes into fights with the Hulk as an underdog that the reader can root for. A story has better stakes if the protagonist is weaker than the antagonist. That's why it's no coincidence that in many of their fights, Thor is the antagonist. Thor guards and imprisons Tamara for the United Nations. Thor tries to assassinate Stalin for Adolf Hitler. Thor attacks Namor while under Morgan Le Fay's control. This helps make the fights a bit more engaging, as it is a protagonist being confronted with a massive obstacle, as opposed to a protagonist beating a weaker antagonist into the ground. However, these instances only prove that Thor is just not well suited for the role of antagonist. Thor is oblivious to Tamara's plight as he guards her, and even worries he was on the wrong side after his fight with Namor. Thor is tricked by Hitler into being an antagonist, but Thor soon realizes he was on the wrong side and fixes his mistake. Thor is controlled by Morgan Le Fay and immediately fights to take her down when he's freed from her control. Namor is an anti-hero who can easily act both as a protagonist and an antagonist. The same cannot be said for Thor. He's a heroic character, acting as a stalwart protector of humanity. Namor can pull off the antagonist role when needed, but Thor needs to be forced into that role. However, not every rivalry is about enemies fighting each other. Sometimes it can come from allies fighting each other. Being on the same team gives ample opportunities to needlessly fight each other, and that is a large reason for the success of Namor's rivalry with the Hulk. Most of his fights with the Hulk have been while they were both members of the Defenders. The two are often bickering, hurling insults, and fighting each other. Namor and Thor have both been members of the same team before, but they've really only had one fight on the same team, and that was in Avengers number 292. And again, that wasn't even really a fight. That leads us to the final reason why Thor and Namor's rivalry never took off. They actually get along pretty well. All those things that they had in common that made them seem like perfect rivals actually just led to a strong mutual respect for one another. In Thor Volume 2, number 14, Namor called it an honor to assist Thor and Asgard. Thor consistently shows respect for Namor even when the two are fighting, and even allowed Namor to escape in their first fight due to the respect he had for him. At one point, the Infinity Stones were hidden by the Illuminati, and Namor, a member of the Illuminati, was in charge of protecting the Time Stone. When these stones started being stolen, Namor gave the Time Stone to Thor. When Namor is put on trial for past crimes, many of the Avengers are barred from testifying due to their secret identities, but Thor takes the stand in Namor's defense. He states that he believes Namor's earlier fights with the Avengers were due to Namor's bouts with amnesia, and he calls Namor a trusted friend and a valiant Avenger. When the prosecutor downplays Thor's testimony, Thor angrily grabs him and accuses him of twisting truths to besmirch his friend. In the past, Thor has pointed out their similarities and invited Namor to share a drink and swap tales. They each consider each other to be worthy of leading their kingdoms. They have consistently referred to each other as being friends and prefer to fight alongside each other rather than against each other. Thor and Namor do not have a truly noteworthy rivalry. Thor is too consistently more powerful for the fights to be close, and too consistently heroic to make them narratively compelling. But maybe that's okay. Maybe two powerful monarchs can respect and like each other. Maybe they can just be friends. Superhero friends. The kind you fight fairly often, but with the knowledge that you'll be friends at the end of it. Well, that's all for this episode of Thor Talk. I hope you enjoyed it. Namor is one of my favorite superheroes. Besides Thor, he may legitimately be my favorite. I don't know, there are a couple hanging out there, but he's definitely my favorite member of the Illuminati. He's great. I'm glad he's getting more exposure with the new movie. With that being said, see you next time on Thor Talk, where...
You'll behold in